Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 140, Donna Troy, as selected by Ariel, who has gone outside of the Bat family once again. There is some, I guess, tangential relation to Batman through the Titans and Dick Grayson, but Donna is largely a Wonder Woman adjacent character, and I think has probably the most confusing backstory in the history of comics. And for those of you who've been listening for a while and you're curious as to which of Donna's moments are going to get the hashtag BecauseComics treatment, the answer is yes.
Yes.
It's just going to be that kind of an episode.
You're in for a treat.
So once again, thank you to all of our patrons, humble citizens, Dan and Kate, local officials, Frank, Ray, Jonathan, mayors, Angela, Chad, Devon, Maggie, Matt, Nyan, Ryan, and Tasha, and presidents Ariel, Jeanine, Matt, and Ruby. You can join the list of those awesome, wonderful people by going to patreon.com/capesonthecouch and subscribing. You can unlock additional content, early access, uncensored material, and a whole slew of other stuff. So y'all keep the lights on the show, and we are grateful to each and every one of you. So Donna Troy, created by Bob Haney and Bruno Tremiani in The Brave and the Bold, number 60, July 1965. So Donna Troy was originally introduced as Wonder Girl, who was Wonder Woman's younger sister, who was created in an effort to desexualize Diana and make her and comics acceptable to parents. This is following the aftermath of the whole seduction of the innocent and, Dr. Wortham and that whole ridiculous thing. I'm not going to get into that. So Wonder Girl was just sort of this nameless, she didn't have a name. She was just Wonder Girl. She was just Wonder Woman's younger sister. So in 1969, she was given a name and a backstory, the name Donna Troy. And we discovered that she was an orphan who was rescued in a fire by Diana and brought to Themyscira and given Amazonian powers. She took the name Donna Troy as her secret identity and joined the Teen Titans.
Hashtag BecauseComics.
In 1984, Marv Wolfman and George Perez expanded her backstory in the new Teen Titans. Her birth mother was an unwed teen who put her up for adoption, and then the adoptive mother put her back up for adoption after she couldn't make enough money to raise Donna. So she ends up being sold, but the sellers get caught in a fire, thus resulting in her orphaning.
Hashtag BecauseComics.
She then marries a man named Terry Long. They have this big lavish ceremony, and honestly, this is probably the least or the most normal thing that happens to Donna in the 60 years that she's been a character. So after Crisis on Infinite Earths, the DC history is rewritten so that Wonder Woman is now newly introduced to the world. This necessitates retconning Donna's history as well. Now she is one of 12 orphans created by the Titans of Myth as Titan seeds, who were named after ancient Greek cities and destined to become great heroes. So Troy, one of the ancient Greek cities, is who Donna is. So the Titans of Myths erased her memory and sent her into the world while battling her sister, quote unquote sister, one of the other seeds, Sparta. The memories came back, and Donna changes her name to Troia and gets a new Star Galaxy styled suit.
Hashtag BecauseComics.
So then Donna becomes pregnant with a child by Terry. And then a group of time-traveling titans from the future reveal that her child is born as a god and destroys the world. So to prevent this from happening, she sacrifices her powers, and her child Robert is born normally. It's kind of like a reverse Terminator type situation.
Hashtag BecauseComics.
She then joins the Dark Stars and becomes an interstellar protector, but this has an impact on her marriage to Terry, and they end up splitting up. So then Terry, Robert, and Terry's daughter from his previous relationship are all killed in a car accident, and the grief ends her brief relationship with Kyle Rayner. Her origin is retconned once again And now she is created by an Amazonian sorceress as a clone of Diana to be her friend. The clone was kidnapped by Dark Angel, who was one of Wonder Woman's enemies, and Dark Angel tortured Donna, forcing her to restart her life repeatedly, that every time she would get low, she would restart her life and then everyone would forget about her. It's also later revealed that Dark Angel is, in fact, a Donna Troy from another reality.
#BecauseComics.
Are you picking up on a theme here, folks? Then it's revealed that Donna is the only one who somehow retains memories of all the multiverse pre-crisis, and that every version of her origin story is simultaneously valid because they are all alternate universe versions of Donna.
#BecauseComics.
So following Infinite Crisis and 1 year later, Donna takes up the mantle of Wonder Woman while Diana serves in the U.S. government. In the New 52, Donna is revealed to be created by an Amazonian sorceress to take over Themyscira from Diana, while somehow also having been a Teen Titan. She then joins the Fates after being killed in battle.
#BecauseComics.
And then Rebirth reconciles that discrepancy once again by saying she was created to destroy Diana, but the Amazons gave her false memories of being rescued to help normalize her.
#BecauseComics.
And that's really like as simple as I could make it while still covering all the batshit crazy that happens.
So could you repeat the part where you were saying about the things?
No.
Okay.
No. And if you don't understand any of what we just described, don't worry. Neither do we. And neither does DC, which is really a shame because underneath all of that muck is a wonderful character. And I think she's certainly different enough from Diana to set her apart as a legacy character, but not in the same token. And again, it's all hilariously confusing. But Wolfman and Perez said, oh, we tweaked the backstory. And then Crisis happened. And they said, well, that's all wiped away. But in the meantime, Teen Titans was still ongoing. And so they had to explain a new version of Donna that somehow didn't mess up the continuity that the new Wonder Woman had established. And that's really where things went off the rails was Crisis. Everything up to that point had been kind of wonky, but you could understand where it was coming from. Everything prior to like 1986 makes sense in some fashion. After that, though, the last 35 years, that's really where things just go haywire. So, issues, identity issues. You don't think? Why would someone like this have identity issues? I haven't the foggiest idea.
So I don't know if I have a great analog for this sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about scenarios that happen in a crisis setting.
Is it an infinite crisis setting?
I was waiting for you. Thank you. So sometimes we get a John Doe or a Jane Doe. And for those that aren't familiar with that term, it means someone who doesn't have identification on them when they enter a hospital, an emergency room or whatever. So now you have to play a guessing game. Of course, the first thing you do if the person is unconscious, because if they're in an emergency room, clearly they're not doing well, is you see if there is something on them that will give a hint. If we're lucky, it's someone we recognize, and therefore we can just look in their chart and get the information. By the way, if it's direct patient contact, that's not a violation. I know some people may be wondering about this stuff, especially if you're trying to save their life. But let's say it's not that type of circumstance where it's unconscious person with serious injuries or whatever. It's a person that's really ticked off, but also presenting severely disorganized, maybe even psychotic, and they just refuse to give information, or even when they're talking, they're not making that much sense. So we have a lot of work to do just to establish basic rapport, and we try our best to see if the person is going to give personal information. Unfortunately, this is also a circumstance where the person may be an unreliable historian. if that's the case, then we're still stuck in the same avenue because even the information that they're giving, if it on the surface makes sense, may not be true at all. Or the person, let's bring it back because I don't want to go down this road because it creates so much of a stigma. Let's say the person just simply is scared. They don't want to give information because they're not trying to run away from a truly dangerous circumstance. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe they have just been assaulted and they don't want the person to know where they are because they're still very close by. So all of this is important just to have the base connection that you can talk to a person. If you don't have that, then it's going to be really difficult to get anywhere. So that's the base I want to start at and recognize that is more common than you think. Thankfully, it's not the most common thing, but it is the one that when it happens creates all sorts of ethical problems because we don't know how far we're supposed to go with the person because we may not even know what the problem is. But let's say, okay, we've gotten past that. We get some baseline information. We now know that this person is who they say they are. How comfortable are you going to be with complete strangers with regards to exploring things that you didn't want to explore? Let's say you don't have all the information yourself. We've already mentioned the idea that someone is adopted. Maybe it's the fact that they've been to several foster families. Which one did they like the most? Which one is the one that they're with now? Which one did they just leave? Are they trying to escape again because there's something that's wrong in that circumstance? We are now investigating other people in that person's life that may or may not even know that that person is around. None of this can be taken for granted. And I apologize for this being so rambling, but it's not something that we all think about. We sometimes get the amber alerts on our phones. We sometimes get the silver alerts on our phones. If you haven't had one of those, it's very similar, except it's with the elderly. Maybe they have dementia and have gotten lost or something. But all these things, when we talk about identity issues, I didn't want to just go into the whole psychodynamic or psychoanalytic realm of what that means and the type of anxiety it causes, because I think that there's something way more practical that we tend to put to the wayside unless it's thrown in our face. My type of job has that happen once in a while, but don't be surprised if you see people in your neighborhood that you think you know, and yet you truly don't. And no one actually takes the time to know them because they're just a fixture of the location. They're just there. You know they're there. And no one actually even asks what's going on, how they're doing. They just do their usual daily routine and they're quietly left alone. Once in a while, someone is going to take a chance on that person, for better or worse. And it might be a good idea if you're trying to do good in the world to just buy them a cup of coffee. Because if you see the fact that they've worn the same clothes for the last 10, 12 days, yeah, it's probably bad for them. And if you notice that they've lost a lot of weight over the past several months, yeah, they probably aren't eating much. So I apologize for bringing this down a bit, but like I said, I wasn't really in the mood to talk about more of the classic psyche and more about the fact that we don't seem to know each other as well as we used to.
I think that's wonderfully put. And I think it's incredibly true in the case of social media that we have so many friends and yet so few people who are actually part of our lives. It's actually, I just recently quit Facebook because I got tired of focusing on so much of the presentation for things. And I said, I want to know how people are actually doing, not just the veneer that they put up on their feed. And also because I didn't want Zuckbot trying to make money and spying on me and all that ridiculous metaverse garbage. Anyway, point being that it's not easy to really legitimately check in with people. And I've spoken before on the show about when you say to somebody, how are you doing? Mean that when you ask that question, be sincere about it. It's not an easy thing because you may get a response back that you're not expecting. But I think if you do that, you strengthen that connection with people and it makes you a better and stronger person for making that connection. And you will find things out about the people that you're trying to connect with, as well as yourself. I think if we all do that just a little bit more, that pie in the sky thinking, maybe the world will be a better place. Maybe I'm just making stuff up. I don't know. But because it comes down to love, and it comes down to connecting with people. And for somebody like Donna, or the analog to a Donna that you're describing, they want the connection. They want somebody to love, and someone to at least acknowledge them inside, somebody to acknowledge who they are and to see them, and they want to be seen, and they want to be heard, and they want to be acknowledged. That's all any of us want.
So just to lighten it up a little bit, as you were saying that, I'm just bopping my head because all I can hear is Queen in my head. Like, find me somebody to love. Find me some. Okay, I'll stop.
Also, George Michael did a great cover of that song. Anyway, so issue number 2, she's got some relationship issues, 2 marriages. And at one point in the special Who is Donna Troy, when she is dealing with the whole Titans of Myth and Coeus, Coeus something, she's married. This is when she's an amnesiac and she believes that she's the Titan of Myth. And then the Teen Titans all show up and they kind of fight and explain to her, no, this is all fake stuff put in your head and everything like that. She says she ends her marriage with the other Titan. And she said, I've got 2 divorces and I'm barely 25. So she's aware of that. So she's got 2 failed marriages. Plus, she dated Kyle Rayner for a thing, but she really, and we didn't get into this in the backstory much, she's got an on again, off again thing with Roy Harper through the Teen Titans.
Check out our Roy Harper episode. My goodness.
You think this one is deep? Go listen to Roy Harper and have some tissues at the ready. And again, she's young. She's got the marriage, which ends tragically, and we'll get to that for issue number 3. But 2 failed marriages and the on again, off again relationship at such a young age, superhero or not, that has an impact.
Oh, for sure. It kind of ties into that original part where what we want is love, affection, and lasting relationships that'll make life that much better. And marriage, not to sound too stereotypical, but we all have the idea that marriage is meant to be long lasting, and you're making a decision about something like that with the best of intentions in mind. Or at least that's the way I'm looking at it. I know sometimes people do it for other reasons, but I'm going to go ahead and be Mr. Positive here on that end. It is unfortunate when marriages end in divorce, but that doesn't necessarily mean, I know you said this, but just to make it clear, not all marriages that end in divorce are failures. If the things that you had during that marriage and the mindset that you have afterwards allow you to continue on in a healthy way as a person. Things don't work out. It sucks. No question about it. But for some reason, and I'm not talking about any analytical data with this, but I've had enough conversations with people and other professionals. For some reason, we have this idea that you kind of get a do-over. In other words, you may get a divorce and then get remarried, and people consider that to be within the normal distribution of the bell curve. But once you get beyond that, there really is a pretty deep scarring stigma that society starts to place. And if I'm off base with this, please someone correct me, but I've seen it for myself, observing what other people have gone through and had them talk to me about it. It almost becomes a scarlet letter situation, because it isn't just about 2 people having a disagreement as to what their lives should be. It is now, depending on how many relationships you've had, it's multiple people against one. It becomes almost a gang up. Like multiple people now are, depending on how it happens, rejecting you. That's the way a person can perceive it. If that's the case, when enough people say something to you, you start to believe it. Doesn't matter what other evidence you have. Because remember, By definition, these are people that are the closest to you at that point in your life. So they are giving you now the most critical feedback to say that you are not worthy of the type of love that I was willing to give to you. This is one way of putting it. But when we're talking about divorce and we're talking about multiple divorces or multiple serious relationships, even if you never decide to quote unquote tie the knot, if you've had that happen over and over and over again, it can lead to this idea that somehow you are flawed, which we all are, but you are flawed, quote unquote, beyond repair. These are not things that I believe, but these are the types of thoughts that can enter a person's mind when they have this. And you also touched on something very key to this with Donna specifically, at a young age. It's one thing to say that you look back on your full spectrum of your life decades upon decades later and may have some points where you say, I probably could have done that a little differently here and there. But by then, you're already at a point where you have hopefully had other things in your life that have been so worthwhile that it all starts to come together and create a greater picture that allows for fulfillment. No offense. I think all ages are great. 25 ain't it. So that's really heady. That's the type of thing, if it's not addressed, can lead the person to think that everything is cut short. There's a lot of cultures that put immense pressure on people to find the one very early in their lives. Now, there is some biological pressure to that too, especially if you want to have children. We all understand that. But putting that to the side a little bit, knowing that there's a certain direction that society is pushing you, and you, in theory, feel like you've checked that box for your life, you're married. You got it. It's done. Cool. Great. And then it gets unchecked, and then you check it again, and it gets unchecked, and you still have those same societal pressures or views or cultural impacts that may come into play even more. All of this really starts to skew the view. And if you're not careful, you may end up putting yourself in this emotional box that just doesn't let anything out because you think that you are absolutely damaged beyond repair. And that's not something that anybody ever should have to feel.
Absolutely. When you're talking about the young ages and everything, all I think of is a song that I absolutely hate, but the line I think is appropriate. Nobody likes you when you're 23. Blink-182. Yes, all ages are great, but there is still a lot of growth occurring throughout the early 20s. God knows, I couldn't have been married at 25.
Hey, wait a minute. Wait. Who's married at 25? Well, who's married before 25? What?
Yeah, exactly. I know my audience. So let's talk about then the tragedy then that is the third issue. Loss of her family in one fell swoop. Her ex-husband, but still a man to whom she had feelings, his daughter, and most tragically, her child, her son, all died in a car accident. And here is someone with powers, although not at the time. At the time, she was with the Dark Stars. So she didn't have powers herself. She had a suit that gave her abilities. But this horrible tragedy that she, in theory, were she present, I'm sure she may have possibly been able to do something. And the guilt of that is eating her alive. It causes her to break up with Kyle. It causes her to really reevaluate things. To lose any one of those is a tragedy. To lose all three in one shot is something I don't know how to respond to that. I don't. And just even the thought of losing a child alone, again, is gut-wrenching. Yeah, I don't care for that.
Yeah. There's no way that myself or anyone who has never experienced something of that magnitude could really say that we know what that feels like. but we all have experienced losses. And so I'll never put any numbers on it. I'll just say that the magnitude just has to be immense. And if there is something that I have heard when a patient relays this to me, or whoever, it doesn't have to be a patient, I don't know if there's the proper words or the proper thing to say or do, because so much of what we talked about and what we talked about earlier in this episode is you want people around you. You want that support. And to not just have those supports go away, but to have them ripped from you, to feel like you're cheated prematurely, it's not just the stages of grief, it's the stages of survival. It's the idea that not just survivors' guilt, but just survivors' injustice. There's so much of a broad spectrum of anger and sadness that are all mixed together, and the genuine fear that there's nothing else in your life. These are the types of things that people have discussed with me. And so many times all I can do is listen. I don't have the proper words. It can leave a person incredibly fearful of doing anything because they wonder if somehow through magical thinking their actions may have brought this on. They may be replaying the things that they did before that maybe they could have done something different so nothing happened, even if it has nothing to do with them. They may blame, in theory, people that could have done something, but of course we're not all mind readers and predictors. Our crystal balls are all cloudy. We have no idea what's going to happen. And yet, the one thing that I think we all can do is just allow that person to cry, allow that person to yell, allow that person to be alone for a little bit, allow that person to cling to us. Just about every range of emotion and behavior is acceptable as long as it's not directly hurting themselves or others. And that is something that is not a problem with the person. That is something that is uncomfortable and awkward for the rest of us. That is the thing that I think we don't acknowledge nearly enough. We don't know what to do, and that's why I keep saying that. And it's okay to not know what to do. Too often, what we end up doing is we end up thinking that because this person is either acting differently or saying something that we wouldn't have personally said, that we have to fix it, that we somehow have to intervene. And I'm here to tell you that no, you really don't. If they ask you to say something, if they ask for your opinion, that's totally fine. But sometimes all they really want is for someone to hear them and for you to shut up and just let them know that anything you need, I'll be there. And as Anthony had said before, mean it. Because when someone in this circumstance actually reaches out, it's not something to be taken lightly. It's not a matter of convenience. It's a matter of safety. This is a situation where people will experience emotions deeper than they ever thought possible. And it can lead then to lasting healing as well over time. I don't know what the timeline is on that. That can be months, that could be years. But whatever it is, recognize that it's their timeline, not yours.
Absolutely. I was literally just about to say, whatever their time frame is, it is not up to you to say, but you're not over it yet. That goes for grief in general. And that's something that I think we collectively as a society are not always the best with, that we press for people to get over things because we want them to be over with, regardless of whatever the individual who's actually going through and experiencing those feelings has. We want it to be over with, but it's not up to us. It's on them. Now, having said that, we need to allow them the space and the capacity to get through that. If it's a situation where it's going on for a lengthy period of time, they should obviously seek counsel. They should be speaking to a therapist. They should be doing something to help them get through that. But you saying, are you over it yet, is not the way to go. And you saying, well, you're just going to have to buck up and power through is not the solution either. That's the kind of thing you say to somebody who's just, having a bit of a rough day and you're like, all right, it'll be over with and tomorrow's a better day and so on and so forth. That is not the thing to say to somebody who's experiencing catastrophic loss like that, who is going through grief on that scale. That's not the time to say, are you over it yet? Because one of the best things I've read is describing grief that comes in waves. And in the beginning, it's like you're clinging to a rock while the waves are just beating down on you and they're just coming fast and furious and you can barely catch your breath enough before the next one comes. And then over time, the grief, the waves become fewer and farther between. And you can see them as they come. And so they don't catch you off guard nearly as often, but they can still sweep you off your feet and you still end up soaked. But the point is that the grief never stops, just that you, in theory, learn how to manage it and handle it better. But again, that's on you, or that's on the person experiencing the grief. It's not on anyone else to say, why haven't you figured out how to deal with this yet? Really powerful stuff. And again, I find it interesting that, we're talking about this following the discussion about Roy Harper, which is also dealing with the loss of a child and that level of grief. So I do think that that's one of the things that connects Donna and Roy together is that shared understanding and that shared experience. It's an experience that no one should go through, but the fact that they both have means that they can lean on each other in those kinds of moments because the other one understands what they're going through. So we're going to take a break. And when we get back, we will get into treatment. So stay tuned.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can begin communicating within 48 hours.
It isn't a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp has a network of over 15,000 counselors with a broad range of expertise. You can log in and message your counselor anytime and get timely and thoughtful responses. You can also schedule regular video or phone sessions. No waiting room required.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you feel you don't have a good connection. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/capes, that's better HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
Special offer for Capes on the Couch fans. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/capes.
I am Connor from the House of L.
And I am Ray from the House of Zod.
We are two of the many, many survivors of Krypton's destruction, and we have made our home in Australia, and dare I say have become Australians, for better or worse. But we have also decided to read Superman comics, read Superman books, watch Superman shows, cartoons, movies, basically everything Superman, and from an Australian perspective as well. Whether you're a seasoned fan, like me,
or whether you are coming in fresh, wide-eyed and wanting to learn more like me, then this podcast is for you. Join us for our bi-weekly adventures available on all good podcast catchers.
So just search for Last Sons of Krypton, a Superman podcast. We'll be coming to you from Australia or some cosmic dimension, wherever we are that week.
Up, and away.
Hi, I'm Meredith Finch, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
Now, welcome back. Treatment in universe for Donna Troy. I would almost say which version. Where are we in the time frame on this? But we'll go with the recent version.
So,
just for, I would say for simplification purposes, but there's no simplification when it comes to Donna.
Well, it doesn't mean I can't try and simplify. So I'm going to have to explain something in the real world that ties back, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So there are some children that as they grow up, they have some self-destructive behaviors. Maybe they bang their head against the floor or against the wall, things like that. You don't want a child to develop further brain damage or anything, so they may have padded helmets. Well, over time, the idea is through proper behavioral analysis and, regular mental health treatment, those behaviors are under control and they're able to have the best life they possibly can, hopefully without those types of self-injurious behaviors. The helmet goes away, but the child may still have a remnant contact. For some children, it's a bracelet, maybe a ring, maybe a necklace. The point is, there's something that may have been shaped more than that. So in other words, maybe it was, just something that was like a hat, and then it transition to other things, et cetera, et cetera. But whatever it is, this object, once in a while, even if it's just making contact with their skin, allows them to have the relief to know that everything's going to be okay. Well, I'm not aware of analogs like that in the DC universe, but I do know a certain woman of wonder who has a certain object that is very well known in the zeitgeist. And I don't necessarily want the whole lasso, but I do want threads. And I do want Donna to wear part of it. Because I don't want the full-blown idea of just saying everything that's on your mind and confessing things, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the point. The point is finding a little bit of essence of yourself that you know is core to who you are. What is your values? What is most important to you? What gives you meaning and purpose in life? And even if it just takes a few strands that you just happen to make into a little charm bracelet, necklace, anklet, I don't care. But just something like that still has some of those properties, but allows you to be comfortable. And for when people ask you who you are, you can give them the type of answer that makes you feel better.
And it would be an honest answer because it's part of the Lasso of Truth. Jeanine says in the live stream, friendship bracelet.
Yes.
That's an excellent way to do it. Good point, Jeanine. So out of universe then, oh boy.
I mean, it depends on which area are we going into. Are we going into, do we go with tragic accidents like what happened with the Bryant family? Do we go with people that have had severe traumatic childhoods that involved a lot of changes and foster families like I was going to say?
So foster family gets, a chance at some stability and then undergoes all of the losses still at a young age. I think that's probably the best we're going to get at an analog for Donna.
Yeah. So similar to how I did the issues, I'll go through treatment this way. If the person seems to really be struggling with just the bases of life, of reality, of shelter, food, and all those other things because things are starting to unravel, as you've said with comics in the past, it's true with what we do, show, don't tell. I'm not going to say, hey, it looks like you're going through a very rough time and I can see that you're emaciated. Maybe you should eat something. That's a ridiculous way to go about it. It's simply, hi, here's a little bit of food. You don't even have to say what you're doing. You just go ahead and do it. People that know what it means will just go ahead and take it for what it's worth. So once again, sticking with the basics of survival, if a person's needs are not being met. And for most of our listeners, this is going to be like, Doc, this is ridiculous. We don't deal with this stuff. I'm like, well, you don't think you do. There are people that really are in these circumstances way more than you realize. So if this is your introduction to it, so be it. You don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. You got enough on your plate. But I'm not going to lie. It's out there and it is something that we all should be aware of. But now let's say that's taken care of. And now we're dealing back to a person that is at a baseline that's less than what they want it to be, but they are fully functional. They are working. They're going about their life, but now don't have the people that were the meaning in their life. just navigating that entire grief process, in addition to any of the previous negative events have happened, that's an uphill battle because it means that I have to challenge their very clear and convincing evidence. They're saying that their life is it. Life was hard before this. They had some relief, and life is hard now. So from my biased background of mostly cognitive behavioral therapy, I have to continue to use their own evidence and point out, and Anthony, to be honest with you, even if you didn't intend to do it, you just gave the framework when you described the waves. I usually use the term roller coaster. The only time that you will officially get hurt to the point that everything comes crashing down is if you try and get off of a roller coaster in the middle of the ride. So from that standpoint, as you also have said, and many people have said, you're still here. You are still surviving. You are still able to process so much of what has already happened. How do you know? How can you predict that every single event from this point forward is going to be negative? Notice how I said that. Every single point. Because if I say, how do you know the next thing's going to be negative? That could be true. It could be another really, really bad thing that happens tomorrow. I don't know that. But do I know it's going to happen every day ad infinitum forever for as long as you live for the rest of your days of drawing breath? I can't say that. And that person can't either. It's something that, depending on how they decide to process it, it may not be the way to go. It may purely be a supportive stance for several weeks without even bringing that topic up because they're not ready for it. It may be, if the person is truly not eating, not sleeping, that we provide tools to help with that, including medication. It may be invoking groups of people who have had similar experiences so that they realize, as our phrase says, that they are not alone. Whatever it is, it's what we do when a person says that life has given them the ultimate unfairness, and there's not a darn thing anybody could say to tell them otherwise. Because I know that's not what I'll ever do.
Yeah, it's a whole litany of complicated things, and I think if you try and address them all at once, you're going to get bogged down and you're not going to get anything done. So you have to take it bit by bit. You know, how do you eat an apple? One bite at a time. How do you run a marathon? 1 foot at a time, 1 step at a time. Break it down, and eventually over time, you can begin to make headway at some of those things. But for somebody dealing with a variety of issues like this, and that goes in general, but
so I'm not going to do the whole thing because I know we try and keep the podcast to a certain length, but there is a fantastic story, and we have used this in groups in our hospital. I don't know the last time it was brought up, but whenever it is, I think it's a great idea, especially for these types of things when it comes to grief. There's the story of the Zen farmer, and it has to do with the local village and this farmer and the things that happened to him. And the villagers keep saying, like, are these good times or are these bad times? And the farmer's answer is always, who knows what may come? Because the whole point is, it's true. And it just goes back and forth. One event happens, farmer just says, who knows what may come? And the villagers always have like a very direct thing, like, oh, wow, that's great. Or, oh my goodness, that's horrible. And he just keeps that path. And as you hear it, you start to realize this is a story that isn't going to end, is it? And that's the point. It doesn't, because that's what life is. Even if it's not your life, if it's everyone around you, all of that, it keeps going.
It's a Shaggy Dog story.
Yeah. Let the story go, though. Give it a chance, because that means that the more people that get to hear it, the greater impact it gets. Just keep going with your story, because let's be real. Nobody's story ends when it's supposed to.
I like that. Very profound. So with the help of Jeanine, who is super awesome, we are going to see what happens when we get Donna Troy on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Donna. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hi, Doc. Nice to meet you.
So what's been going on that you came to see me?
I'm not exactly thrilled about this, but I'm having some trouble turning the page in my life.
Go on.
This is going to be a bit complicated, so try to keep up.
You don't have to preface anything. My job is to listen. You're the one in charge of your life and how it unfolds.
Am I, though? Anyway, I guess you can say it starts with my family problems. I always felt like I owed everything to my sister, and I started to resent her for it. It's not easy living in the shadow of someone like that.
Yes, I could see how that could be painful. You do seem to have a strong presence. So if your sister shares the same trait, I'm sure there were some conflicts.
Oh, of course. There was a time she saved me, but I can be guilt-free about that. I was a kid. Then I tried to take over for her. Then I tried to be her. You know how it goes.
Wait, what?
Nothing, really. She's just hard-headed and gets emotional when I steal the spotlight.
I see. I think. While I'm sure you know her well, I'd be careful to project your own interpretation of what someone else is feeling as pure fact.
Don't I know it? I think that's what a lot of people do to me.
For instance?
I get rumors that people think I'm sort of, I don't know, a difficult person to get along with. They just can't handle a woman who's able to dish it out as well as take it.
Yeah, haters always exist. Try to ignore the noise.
But what if it's your own husband? Hate's not the right word there. We were just different to each other over time. Thank goodness I had the fortitude to learn that there are other fish in the sea. Losing them still hurts, though.
Yeah, I get that. Grief is totally natural. The pain fades, but it remains, only altered through time and reflection.
Oh, it's worse than that. I've lost so much, Doctor. Not just divorce, but death. All of it is unfair. All of it.
I hear it in your voice. Death is not something that anyone could take lightly.
And to relive it only to die again, then to try again and be beaten down over and over. What would you do? Go crazy? No. I fight on. And if it weren't for me, I wouldn't have survived.
You showed a lot of resolution in conquering your own self-doubt. I'm sorry, is this a metaphor or?
I have to live. I have to be who I am. I'm nobody's puppet. Doctor, you can think I'm losing my senses all you want, but sometimes things aren't going to make sense when I'm talking to you. I may screw up some details, but I recognize that everything I'm going through is real. Nobody should have to endure what I have. And when I get the chance, I make sure I put a stop to anyone that tries to do that to someone else. Do I make myself clear?
From an emotional standpoint, yes. I'm not your enemy.
What if I am? What if, based on everything I know about myself, everyone thinks I'm a risk that they don't want? What does that say about my love life, my career? How do I deal with the fact that the way I torture myself is to make myself fail over and over without mercy? How do I love myself enough to ignore how much I hated myself?
Ooh, you know what? I don't know. I won't pretend. I don't know how to process everything you've said so far. I'm still trying to untangle the convoluted way you said things, but I'm willing to do that. I'm not promising that this is going to be easy, and I'll have to remain candid about the times that you lose me. If you're willing to still talk to me as I improve my grasp of your situation, I can offer you some better insight. Until then, I think you need to slow down just a bit and let your thoughts catch up with your emotions.
I don't just sit back and let people tell me what to do.
But usually I do sit back and I let people tell me what they want. I'm doing that with you, and that only leads to more tangents. So I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. And you know what? I think I'm going to rope this in just a bit.
Like her.
Bad choice of words. I'm allowing you to focus. Back to basics. Who are you?
You start with the hardest question.
Clarifying. What is your name?
Donna Troy.
And let's stop there. Thank you.
What?
Look, you can be confident in knowing that you're Donna Troy. There's so much to unpack beyond that, but for now, let that be your principle. All of the other stuff may wax and wane in your conscience, but you need to keep yourself centered. You are Donna Troy. That's a worthy existence. Each session, I'll let you spend a bit of time saying what's on your mind, but in the end, we'll add one clarifying statement to conclude. That way, you'll be more sure of yourself so that you can trust yourself enough to know that you can handle anyone who gets in your way, even yourself.
You don't get it, but you get it. I can work with that.
Wonderful.
Don't start.
Well, first off, thank you, Jeanine. That was awesome. I always love to get input from our guests, and even more so when it's a patron. And to step in like you did and do an awesome job is always appreciated. So thank you very much for that.
So I just want to make it clear that with everything that happens in your life, you're going to have certain thoughts, certain emotions, certain behaviors. Just make sure that they're genuine and you're not being your own Trojan horse.
You're a little early on the pun, but good to know. So recommended reading is the DC special, The Return of Donna Troy, because I think that's one of the more recent-ish stories that tries to condense her backstory into something making a bit of sense. And it's straightforward as a Donna Troy story can be, given, again, all the wacky things that have happened historically with the character. So check that out. It's available on DC Universe Infinite, and I'm sure you could find it in a trade somewhere. So next episodes are Homelander and Polaris, and then we are going to go on our holiday break in the month of December, and then we'll come back in January. You can find all of our episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. So feel free to join us there and give us a like and follow and share that content, because the more you do, the more folks will see and hear us. And that's kind of what we're all about here on this show. And again, at the top of the show, we thanked all of our patrons, patreon.com/capesonthecouch. You can subscribe there and unlock additional content, early access, etc. So Doc already gave his pun, unless you've got another one, or unless I completely forgot and he's going to rewrite it and completely ignore the first pun, because that would be kind of fitting with the Donna Troy. Nope, got nothing. All right. Well, for Doc,
Wait.
Okay.
So this isn't a pun, but because we have this issue with identity and her name is Troy, all I could think of is Nicolas Cage in the movie Face Off. So now someone's going to create a deep fake saying, I am Donna Troy. And it's going to really creep me out.
No more drugs for that guy. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.